we're so blessed to be in them, to be alive in this moment, in this time, space, and these bodies, and these minds, and these beautiful beings. So, okay, so we're together. And I just want to share just some miracles, really. You know, I'm just thinking about the connections we have in this room and the way in which things are unfolding. And I want to start with the work inside. As Sweetwater was talking about, she starts with prayer. And I think all of us have our ways of connecting with some greater vision. And I think that is what sustains us as we work in this world, which sometimes doesn't really reflect the vision that we know is possible. And some of those visions for me as a lawyer, my personal story, 20 years of doing employment and civil rights litigation, part of my vision of bringing people to justice, people wanting to see me bring justice, was I had this realization that I was actually bringing them to war because of our systems of law. And like the systems of law that weren't serving the Native peoples, you're looking for other treaties, other ways of engaging, because you're not going to buy into the systems that were imposed upon you. There's something else about how we engage with people that was calling me. I was fortunate to meet with Susan, to learn about restorative circles, to learn about other alternate engagement practices, to be in circle with other people like Phil, to learn ways of engaging that are really resonant with the indigenous people and the ways of tradition. And coming together in circles like Compassionate Seattle, we vision and imagine what if in our communities we engage conflict differently. We were seeing a lot of police violence in the communities. We imagined what if we had a different way of dealing with that. How could we imagine coming together so we don't have violence escalate? And we thought, well, what are these other restorative practices? What are these other ways of learning about culture, about division? And started imagining things a little bit differently. And then there was the tragic shooting of John T. Williams by a Seattle police officer. And the community was outraged. And you see the video that was later released about that, and you see how cultural ignorance and how a command and control mentality resulted in a very sad situation where a carver walking along the street with the tools of his trade, his knife and his wood, was shot by a Seattle police officer. And later the police department found that to be an unjustified shooting, and there has been a lot of learning that's come from that. Lawsuits, civil rights, protests, but also a lot of change within the Seattle Police Department. The Justice Department saying there's a pattern in practice and there needs to be a reform at a very deep level. And all of that is moving forward, okay? A lot of work by organizing the community that Sweetwater was involved in. I was involved as one of the lawyers on the civil rights team. There was an inquest. But one thing that was remarkable was out of this visioning about how can we do things differently, how can we engage the community around conflict differently. When the shooting happened and our office started representing the family of John T. Williams, we realized there was a lot of conflict ongoing between the police department and the family, because they were carvers too. And they were still having their knives, and they were still having interaction with the police. And some of those interactions were not positive. And there was anger in the streets, and we were worried that there would be some escalation, and that the needs of the people as they were living in community were not being met. Because our traditional system doesn't really look at the needs of the people all the time. So we thought we would try something different. And we held a circle with the Seattle Police Department and the family, surviving family, and some members of the community to talk about some of these ongoing interactions. And you were commenting before, when's the last time in Seattle we really sat together and really listened, and really heard each other's stories and what's going on, right? That was a moment where we called a circle and we actually listened, where the family was able to say to the command staff what was going on for them and why it mattered and what their needs were, and how angry they were about the lack of respect and who gave you the right to play God. And the police were able to say, we are so sorry for what happened. We know you belong here. We need to learn. And we were able to bring people who did have a relationship with the family in to say, I know this family. I've known the fathers of these people. We know and we trust one another, and we can have a direct line of communication, and we can avoid some of the problems perhaps that have come from this. And we can change training and we can change culture. So we had a circle, we came up with some agreements that would allow some safety and some greater sense of connection so that people could move forward through all the legal proceedings, all of the healing, all of the going on with life that happens after a tragedy like that. So I thought that was amazing, really, and it impacted how that legal process worked from my perspective as a lawyer, and it was better. And then we started envisioning how could we do more of that kind of work? How can we create more opportunities for people to come together to engage differently? What can we learn from other cultures that do this? What can we learn from other nations that do this? What can we learn from traditions that we've been evolving in this country? So Susan's been doing compassionate communication in ways in which one learns to listen deeply. We've been learning together and with Phil and with others ideas of restorative circles, a practice that evolved from Dominic Barter in Brazil. And we've been practicing how do we come around with one another to engage conflict, to come up with collective solutions, and to deepen learning, and other restorative justice practices. So we've been doing that. We've been building slowly the understanding and the group, like Libby and others who engaged in the work, and Elle, and we've been practicing and imagining how could it be differently. And that's starting to shift the way people are thinking about it. And I want to share just an invitation for you to continue doing the work and imagining how we do it differently, and to invite your participation, because a remarkable thing has just happened in terms of the platform that we can engage, which is the Seattle Police Department is just hiring an Office of Professional Accountability Director to handle all of its disciplinary action and such. And because of my work, I actually stepped in and said, I could do that job. I would bring a very different perspective to that job. I could do all the civil rights stuff and all that, but we can also do a different kind of community engagement. So I started talking with them about this, and I was actually a finalist. And they didn't offer me the job, and that's announced, and that's good. Because what they'd asked and said was, maybe there's something else that you could do, which is to help us put together a more restorative justice initiative within the city. So to invite all of these different ways of engaging so that maybe we can do it differently. We as a compassionate city can have a compassionate justice system. We can have maybe a parallel system of engagement in our communities and with our people that can look at brewing issues and come together and come up with some collective solutions and some empowerment. So I'm super excited that, Richard Conlin and Nick Licata, they're going to need to think about this. They're going to need to figure out what this looks like, how we budget for it. But the mayor and the police department, the city attorney's office, and the leadership of the city of Seattle are coming forward and saying, let's try something different. What's been going on hasn't worked that well, and we're willing, really, to engage in a different way. So that's an opportunity for us to continue our collective work. And the thought I have is, if we're creating new ways of engaging internationally, why can't we come up with ways that we engage at the most local levels and at the international levels that somehow resonate? Can we come up with a range of practices, if you will, that are like our civic engagement tools? And that we know that if I have an issue that happens to cross a border with British Columbia, or a border between my neighborhood and the next one, or maybe a border of cultures or departments in the city or neighborhoods, maybe we can have a way of coming around that we all know. And so then we can really sit in circle with one another. We can really sit together and figure out what the needs are, how we meet those needs, what the impact of to the community has been of this problem or this discordance, and how we collectively can take the power back and make the city we want to, and the world we want to live in. So I'm inviting actually an international idea out of this collaborative. You know, what I was thinking was a city idea. I think is much bigger than that. So I'm excited to invite more conversation about what do we want to see as part of our city's engagement. And it doesn't have to be today, it's an ongoing conversation. But I'm excited that everyone's here and that we had the opportunity to think out of the box on all of these issues, because I think that's what we all have in common, is we're trying to create new ways of doing things where the old systems haven't worked.